very exciting series of workshops and events. Today we are going to be having a workshop on the world of work, impacts of childcare policy on women and the economy. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. And we're very grateful to be having this opportunity to be here living and working on these lands. My name is Marisol Peterson. I'm a social planner with the City of Vancouver. And we're excited to be part of this series, Women Deliver Satellite Sessions, which is a 4-day series focused entirely on women's equity. The event promises to provide a lot of thought-provoking discussion and workshops. We encourage you to take as much advantage as possible. It is an event that's hosted by the City of Vancouver with the kind support of Vancouver Public Libraries. Just a few housekeeping items. The washrooms are just at the very end of the hall on your left-hand side. There's also a water refill station there. And you'll notice that we have a camera set up. This session is being live streamed. Only the panel presenters up here will be filmed. And after the session, we'd just like to invite you to head down to the 8th floor if you have a chance to explore the Women Deliver Cities art exhibition. This display documents the work of 24 local artists, women artists, for whom the built environment is both their subject matter and their field of action. So if you have some time, check out. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to your moderator, Councillor Jean Swanson, to my right, who's going to lead us through this session. First, about Councillor Swanson, if you don't know, Jean Swanson's kids were little. When Jean Swanson's kids were little, there was no childcare. So when she ran for COPE last year, she ran on a platform of working toward free childcare for all kids. Jean was elected to City Council in 2018. She ran with COPE, which is the Coalition of Progressive Electors. Other parts of the platform include working to protect renters, provide housing for people who are homeless, and getting non-market housing for lower-income renters. For some 40 years, Councillor Swanson has worked to get governments to reduce and end poverty, for which she was awarded the Order of Canada in 2017. She's the author of the book Poor Bashing, The Politics of Exclusion. And for the last 12 years, she's volunteered at the Carnegie Community Action Project, working for more and better housing, higher welfare rates, and stopping gentrification in the downtown east side. In August 2018, Councillor Swanson spent 4 days in jail blocking access to the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And she's now one of the leads on the Joint Childcare Council. So with that, I'd like to welcome Councillor Swanson to introduce us. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a little script here as an official city councillor, official city event. This is new for me still. But we all know women's equality affects everyone, and we know that the full inclusion of women boosts the economy, increases productivity, and reduces child poverty. And we know that one of the biggest barriers to the full inclusion of women in the paid workforce is the lack of child care and access to child care that's affordable. In 2018, before I was on council, the city engaged more than 1,600 residents to develop a new 10-year child care strategy, a city for all women. In it, access to affordable child care, quality child care, was cited as the #1 action that can immediately and positively impact all women's lives and their economic participation and independence. So in Vancouver, women currently make up, I thought this was really interesting, 70% of minimum wage workers, 76% of part-time workers, 60% of people collecting employment insurance, and only 24% of the higher paid science, tech, engineering, and math workers. One of the factors limiting women in the workforce is being referred to as the motherhood penalty, which includes the employment gap between men and women and the earning gap between mothers and non-mothers. Since the 70s, Vancouver has led the way in demonstrating the role of municipal government in childcare. And it does so through these 5 things: policy and research, space creation and regulation, funding, advocacy and partnership, and to date, the city has facilitated over 4,400 licensed childcare spaces. That's the good news. The bad news is we still have 16,000 to go.
Sorry, did you say 16 or 60?
16. Yeah. So thanks to the highly successful $10 a day campaign, Iglika, Sharon, spearheaded by the BC Coalition of Childcare Advocates, the province of BC has started implementing a universal childcare system last year, and currently we have 8 centers in Vancouver that are operating at $10 a day universal childcare prototype sites. So we're fortunate to be joined by our 2 amazing panelists to learn more about childcare policies and investments and how they affect women in the paid workforce. So Iglika wants to go first, so I'll introduce her first. She's the Senior Economist and Public Interest Researcher at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. She's a feminist who researches and writes on key social and economic challenges facing our province. Her reports and studies propose evidence-based solutions to build a more just, inclusive, and sustainable society. She's a regular media commentator on public policy issues and a blogger on policynote.ca. Outside of work, Iglika volunteers on boards, in coalitions, and in various community advisory roles in the service of promoting equity and empowering women and other marginalized people. And then maybe I should do Sharon now too. Sharon, in addition to being my neighbor, we live in the same co-op, is the spokesperson for the successful $10 a day childcare campaign. Like Sharon is actually Ms. $10 a day childcare.
And a whole team of women.
And building a public system of quality, affordable childcare. Quality is always important, she's always saying. She works with the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC and travels extensively, speaking with local governments, school boards, community, labor, and business about the childcare and the $10 a day plan. She was twice elected as a trustee to the Vancouver Board of Education and is a well-known feminist skilled in campaign strategy and government and stakeholder relations. Thank you. And Iglika, you want to go first, right?
All right. Do you want me to stand? Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session, the first of the city's parallel sessions for the Women Deliver Conference. So it's very exciting to see so many people get up regularly and show up. I think it is an important topic. My name is Jean Swanson, Iglika Ivanova, and I'm an economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. And today I'm going to talk about the economic benefits of universal, affordable, quality childcare. And we'll talk about why each of these items is really important for the economic benefits to really show themselves. The work I'm going to talk about is based on this research project I did several years ago, looking specifically at affordability, but in general in solving the crisis in childcare in BC. And if you are interested, it's all available online and you can read it. It's not behind a paywall. All of our research at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is free on our website. We really believe in open and transparent information and not putting paywalls. So for those who don't know, I just want to say a couple of words for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. It's a non-profit, independent research institute or think tank that's concerned with issues of social, economic, and environmental justice. So we do a lot of reports similar to these on issues that really impact Canadians today. And we try to promote solutions based on certain core values like dignity and opportunity for everyone and equity, so that we can all enjoy the benefits of the rich society that Canada is. And I think you'll see that childcare specifically is one key area where I think there's a lot of room for improvement in Canada and a lot of opportunity to make life better. So the reason why I'm doing this work and the reason why this session is so important is that I do believe that childcare is one of the areas where there is almost the most untapped opportunity to improve quality of life for people. It's to improve our living standards in the future by providing all children with the education and opportunities they need early in life to fully develop and to reach their potential, and by providing opportunities for parents to return to work and reach their potential after they've had children. And that particularly applies to women, and women right now, even with the current policies the BC government has introduced, these are just first steps, and when women still are struggling a lot to get back into the workforce after having children. So I just want to put up this quote from U.S. President Barack Obama, former president's State of the Union address in 2015, which I think really illustrates the point. And I'll just read it for you. He said, "It's time we stop treating childcare as a side issue or a women's issue and treat it like the national economic priority that it is for all of us." And I think this is key. I really think we need to stop talking about it as a side social family type issue. It is an economic issue. It affects society as a whole. It's not just about women. And until we stop dividing social policy from economic policy, we're not going to see the progress we need to see. So why is it an economic issue for all of us? Here's 7 key reasons. And they all come from research, and we can talk about the research if you're more interested. But there's research from multiple social science disciplines and hard science disciplines like neuroscience and biology, that the early years are the key time for child development. It's when the brain develops, it's when cognitive skills develop, it's when behavioral skills, language, and all of these things are really influenced by the environment in which you're in. And access to early learning and childcare, access to quality early learning and childcare opportunities are key for development. So it's hugely important for children. And we know that a lot of children today don't have the opportunities they need, and a lot of them go to school not meeting the benchmarks for early development in Canada and in BC. There's about 30% of children who show up in grade 1, 30% that don't meet the benchmark in at least one of the key developmental indicators. And we know childcare will help with that. So it improves child educational attainment in the future. So it's being linked, good childcare programs are being linked to child educational attainment, at age 20, 25, and a future labor market outcomes. So they can actually earn higher wages if they have early life opportunities, and that's really important. It facilitates social inclusion. If we get children centered, then we have mixing between different social groups who otherwise we don't very much. This is important in our communities as we get more polarized. It enables parents to return to work, and we'll talk about why this is important, and it's hugely important for mothers. There's much research that unfortunately still, the culture is such that when one parent has to take time off work to take care of a child, it's overwhelming with the mother. And it is linked to wage gaps, because if you earn less as a woman, and your husband earns more, and you have to pay the bills, guess who has to take time off work? It's not going to be the higher earner, it's going to be the lower earner. Being able to have both people reduces family poverty. And we've seen that in societies that have implemented, or provinces that have implemented childcare like Quebec. We have seen massive drops in child poverty and in family poverty. It's hugely important for single parents, but for couples as well. It reduces gender inequality. It actually reduces the motherhood wage penalty. So it reduces both inequality between the salaries of men and women, and it reduces inequality between the salaries of women with children and women without children. Because you don't have to take such a long gap outside the workforce to take care of your kids, you don't miss out on all the changes in your field. And now we know with technology things are changing very fast. If you're out of work for 3-5 years, You know, your skills are kind of obsolete in many areas. And it's very, very hard to go back to a higher paying job. So that's why we see huge gaps. The longer you take out of the labor market to raise your children, the bigger the gap is. And the thing with the gap is, we think the gap is in the 1 year, oh, I earned less this year, but it's cumulative over your lifetime. It means less savings, it means lower pension, it means seniors, women are poor, and we see that. And these wage gaps are connected to bigger issues that just, it's not fair to get paid less than that. And it isn't fair to get paid less than that. And it makes life better for families generally who are currently in BC struggling with huge affordability pressure. Housing is insanely expensive, and having also childcare bills that are over $1,000 a month, that's just untenable for most parents. So how are we doing compared to the rest of the world? You don't need to read the names of countries. There's 37 OECD countries on this list, and out of 37, Canada's third from the bottom in terms of public spending on early childhood education and care as a percent of GDP. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't realize. And you know what's worse? That most of Canada's spending too is due to Quebec. And outside the province of Quebec, the spending on early childhood education and care is tiny, tiny as a share of our economy. So we're at 0.2% or 0.2% of our economy going to early childhood education and care in 2015. So now with the BC government's investment, it will budget. But you know, BC is only 14% of the Canadian population economy, so it's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna move the Canada dial very far if we don't see similar investments in other places. And if this matters, because the OECD and you know, other international organizations that have done research on this area have actually recommended a benchmark of 1% of your economy to be invested in early childhood education and care programs. And we are at 0.2%, okay? So we're quite behind the benchmark. The OECD average is 0.7, so it's getting closer, but we're quite behind the average. As you can see, the top, of course, it won't surprise you that it's like Ireland, Sweden, Iceland, Sweden, and Norway. So it's like Nordic countries are at the top and way above the benchmark, and then you have Canada. And you know the countries that are worse than us are Turkey and Greece and the US. So just to give you an idea of how poorly we're ranked relative to comparative countries. Even the United States is slightly above us, 2 notches above us. So we're worse than the United States. So, you know, this is something not a lot of people know, and I think you should know, you know, like spread this information because it is important. So here's some evidence that actually women's workforce participation is hugely impacted by the availability of childcare. They call this one a tale of two provinces, and it shows the workforce participation of women with children under the age of 6 in Quebec, Wuhan, and in BC. And the data is available for over 40 years now, from 1976. And you can see that Quebec and BC were very, very similar for a long period of time. You know, we both have workforce participation of women with young children, both slightly below the Canadian average. I didn't want to put too many lines, but the Canadian average is slightly above, you know, where we were for this first period. So 20 years between 1976 and the late 90s were the same as Quebec. And then something happens. What do you think happens in the late 90s? That's when Quebec introduced its affordable childcare program. It's universal childcare, $5 a day, started coming in 97, 98, and it took them 10 years to fully implement. But you see what has happened. And now Quebec, which started like BC at below the workforce participation of women with young children in Canada, is now leading Canada in workforce participation of women, and BC is back on its trajectory. I mean, it's going up. It's not that it's not going up, it's going up. It just could be a lot higher if we had childcare. And this is significant. This gap is a big deal. It is people not being able to support their families, it's not being able to develop their careers. It's women living in poverty in their senior years, you know, or with much lower incomes than they could be. Investing in childcare is also a direct benefit to business, and we don't often think about it, but because I was asked to talk about the economic benefits, I wanted to put it out there. Because actually, it is a problem for employers when they're trained and highly qualified and competent workers can't come back. They can't find childcare, they can't come back to work after parental leave, And so they have to go through the process of, and it's expensive to hire and train and bring someone else out to school. Also, if you are less stressed out in terms of being able to balance work and family because you actually have quality childcare and you're not worried about what's happening to your kid while you're in the office, you are more productive, turns out, and you contribute more to the organization you work for. And of course, more parents going back to work and less family poverty and slightly higher disposable incomes for families means you can now afford to go out for dinner every once in a while. You can afford to take your kid to the movie. You can afford to buy a gift for your child's birthday. And all these things means money in the local communities and supports local business. And of course, with children having better opportunities to develop their full potential, we have a more skilled and healthier workforce in the future, 20 years later. So that helps. I probably don't have to sell to this group the idea of why it's beneficial for more mothers to return to work if they want to return to work. But there's a lot of research, and actually some of the interesting stuff that people may not know about, although I'm sure you all know about it from your own personal experience, is that research has found that when women when the gap in the family is smaller between women's and men's earning, women actually have more say and power in the household. It impacts household decisions. It impacts what the money gets spent on. And when women have more say and power in household decisions, that is being related very closely to more spending on goods and services for children's well-being. So educational opportunities for children, programming for children, things like that. Is it related to women earning more? So it's not just related to family income, it's like how the family income is earned. So if the same family income is earned by just the dad working and the mom staying at home, the family spending patterns are different in many cases. For moms and women, it serves as insurance in the case of family breakdown. If you have an abusive relationship and you can't afford to take your child because you can't afford to find housing with your child, then you're not going to leave an abusive relationship. And we see too many women stay because they can't afford to go out on their own. And having wages and not having a big gap in your earnings, because you did have childcare in early age, it actually helps women way beyond, early age of their children. The smaller wage gap I talked about, that means, higher pensions, higher savings in the future. As the economy is a whole, we benefit from using the skills of Canadians. Women now are more likely to have higher education than men, and then to say, and they're not going to work because they are taking care of the children, that's kind of wasteful for the Canadian economy. And then to the extent that we're worried about population aging and having a smaller workforce to support the larger group of retired folks, we're going to need healthcare services and all other kind of social supports. We need all hands on deck. We need all the women to work. We need, all the groups that have been excluded, people with disability, indigenous people, to be working. And so we can't afford to have the women miss out. The key principles, though, and I think Sharon can talk more about that, or we can talk in the Q&A, it needs to be high quality. It needs to be universal. It needs to provide access to everyone. If there's going to be spaces only for 20% of kids, it's not achieve its outcomes. And it needs to be affordable. So right now, the government's done a lot of work on the affordability part, and we've made huge strides on the affordability. If we don't have more spaces, it's only affordable for the people who are accessing the spaces that exist, and we're not going to see the huge labor force impact if more people can access it. That's, depends on everyone being able to access it. And so the quality one, I think, is one that we don't often think about. It's kind of obvious that high quality is better, but there's actually evidence that lower quality childcare and early education programming may actually be harmful, and that's a problem. But the idea here is that some people are trying to make a firm distinction between, what's the learning part of childcare and what's the childcare babysitting part. But at age 2, there isn't a distinction. Like, children learn to play, right? It's harder, it's a well-integrated package, and that's what $10 a day plan is. It's a well-integrated package of care and learning. And we know from the research what determines quality, well-educated early childhood educators. So we, minimum standards for education for the providers, and the government's, moving in that direction. And we need smaller ratios between number of children to educator. We know that's related to quality. And taking care of huge numbers of children, it doesn't work. And the other thing is you need these workers to be well compensated. They need to get a living wage, because if they leave as soon as they can get a better paying job somewhere else because they can't support their own families, then you're not going to have any continuity. You're not going to have any kind of experience building up with these people. You're constantly going to be hiring and short staff and having bigger ratios of children to educators. And that's kind of how it operates right now. Because early childhood educators are paid very low wages. A lot of them can't afford to send their own children to the program that they're teaching in, because and a lot of them can't afford to live in the city. So it quite literally, even though they love their jobs and they're good at them, as soon as they can get something that pays better, they leave because they need to pay rent. And so retention and recruitment is a huge problem in this field, and we are not going to solve it until we fix the wages situation. So the government is making major new investment in childcare. Here, let me just keep you guessing what they are. Started in last year's budget. You can read this document online if you're interested in the details. But there's two new programs to improve affordability. One is universal, so everyone's fees go down. It's called the fee reduction program. And over 80% of childcare providers have opted in to provide a fee reduction to all parents, and it's based on how much the reduction is, depends on the age of the children and on whether it's family-based childcare or group childcare. There's like a schedule on. So for group-based childcare with children 3 to 5, it's like $100 a month, and for younger children, it's $350 a month. So $350 a month, it's a big deal. For a family budget. So there's also some funds to build new spaces, but that's not progressing very fast. Then we can maybe talk about it in the Q&A. There's investments in quality. There's some more investment in training early childhood educators, and there's some modest wage increases, but we need a lot more of that. There are the pilot prototype sites that are offering $10 a day childcare today. There's 2,500 spaces in BC offering $10 a day childcare today. And so we're studying kind of how that plays out, and hopefully expanding it. And there's also funds to expand culturally based programming for Indigenous children and spaces for children with special needs. I kind of love that there's childcare over there. It's so kind of appropriate. So I just want to tell you how big of a deal this is. As you know, we calculate, or you might not know, but the BC Office of the CCPA, where I work, we calculate the living wage, or what do people have to earn in the city to be able to support two young children in the family, right? And we estimate that in 2019, the living wage is $19.50 for a family in Metro Vancouver. And that living wage, which is, as you can see, considerably higher than the minimum wage, it's actually lower. This number is lower than last year's. Last year was 2062, and the difference is the childcare affordability program, right? It reduces the living wage because last year this family was considered too wealthy to get any subsidies from government, any support for childcare. But now the childcare support system changed, and we have this new affordable childcare benefit. And now a family with income up to $110,000 a year qualifies for partial affordability benefit. And so a family, the living wage family, has income about $70,000 a year. And so with that income, they qualify for over $7,000 a year. So last year they got $0, this year they get $7,000. That has a huge impact on the family budget. But it's bigger than just the difference between 2062 and this, because guess how much the living wage would have been this year with this year's rents if we didn't have the child care. Does anyone want to just quickly?
30-something.
The 30, so it's not quite that big, but it would have been $22.47. It's a very modest budget. So you can see it's $3 of an impact on an hourly wage for each parent is that this affordability benefit that the new child care investments the BC government has made. So, it is enormous. It is an enormous change. So what's next? Very briefly, We can talk more about it, but we really need to invest in building more facilities and building more spaces. And these need to be publicly owned, because right now there's been a problem with the government perhaps maybe giving grants. Right now there are some grants available to build spaces, but not enough people are coming forward. And the people who are coming forward to build spaces are private sector, like for-profit operators. So they're using public funds for someone to build a building and own it, as an asset, it's the real estate market. So it's like, is that the best use of public dollars to support someone's private, asset accumulation? Maybe these should be public the way we build schools. We don't just say, hey, parents, get together and maybe put on a proposal and borrow some money and you can build a local school. We'll give you some grants. That can work very well. But that's what we're doing with childcare. It's like, we'll kick in some money, you kick in the rest, and let's build childcare. But we need to actually build it the way we build schools, because there's nothing magic at age 5. We used to think that learning starts at age 5. Now neuroscience has advanced. The last 20 years tell us learning does not start at age 5 or 6 or 7. It starts early. It's time for our education system to, take in the last 20 years of science and implement it and actually start investing in learning before age 5. We need to have additional wage increases for childcare educators if they get paid below living wage, which they still do, even with the lower living wage. It's just not going to work. They're never going to solve the recruitment and retention crisis. It doesn't matter how many new training spaces you offer and how many scholarships you give people. Yeah, people are going to do the training, and then 2 years later, they're going to realize they can't pay their bills, and they're going to go work somewhere else. So we really need to fix the wage problem. And we need to continue reducing fees for families, because even with the support, if you have more than one child, it's quite difficult to afford childcare space. So thank you. And if you want to know more, we have a lot of research on our website. I brought some promo materials too if you want to talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Iglika. That was great. Sharon?
Do the techie thing here. Excuse me. Where did you see that? Okay, I'm going to stay sitting if you don't mind. So, Iglika's covered tons of great materials, so I'm going to give you some information about sort of the context, the real lives context of women, particularly in Vancouver, but across BC, and what's happening, what are the good things happening and some of the challenges and real life experience of women on the ground. So, first of all, I need you to know that the booklet you have in front of you, the $10 a day plan, you hands up before you knew you were coming today, who had heard of the $10 a day childcare plan? Okay, so almost everybody got it. The real name is that banner along the top, a community plan for a public system of integrated early care and learning. So anybody who's on Twitter, you'll know that that does not work well. So very early on when we launched the plan in 2011, the branding $10 a day rose to the surface. But don't be fooled. $10 a day is not just about the affordability needs for families. It's about a comprehensive plan to get from the mess that we're in now in our childcare worlds to where we need to be in 10 years. I'll talk a little bit about that. So, what does chaos look like in British Columbia? So we're getting close to having 600,000 children in our province, ages 0 to 12. The vast majority, more than 2/3 of those children have got mothers in the paid workforce. And yet, even with the new spaces that have come online in the last year, we've still got only just over 100,000 licensed spaces. So we've clearly got a lot of children in the unregulated sector. Some of them are with their grandparents, some of them are even with their great-grandparents, some of them with the lady down the street. That might be fine, but some of them are in potentially unsafe, illegal, tragically inadequate types of care. It's also unaffordable, as Iglika mentioned, for families. Hands up here, who's got young children? Okay, so if you've got anybody under the age of 3 in your house and you need childcare, you'll know you're lucky to pay $1,000 a month. That's cheap for infant care. If you've got a 3 or 4-year-old, maybe you're paying $800 a month. If you're very unlucky, you might be in one of the for-profit chains that's charging over $2,000 a month for childcare for one child. So if you've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, you can almost bet you're paying more for childcare than you are for your rent or mortgage. And yet, the high fees that families pay never ever translate into high wages for early childhood educators. It simply doesn't work that way. And so there's a huge recruitment and retention issue. So another aspect of the problem is not just about the issue for the families, for the parents, the adults, it's also about for the children. So there was something in our province called the EDI, the Early Development Instrument. It's how we measure vulnerability of 5-year-olds when they start kindergarten. It's done across the province in every school district. It's been done for years. And unfortunately, the vulnerability of 5-year-olds in our province is getting worse, not better. Some years ago, the provincial government set themselves a target to reduce childhood vulnerability to 15% by the year 2015. It was catching called 15 by 15. And instead of going down to 15%, the vulnerability rate has gone up to 32% now. And in Vancouver, in our school district, city proper of Vancouver, it's 36%. That's a lot of children starting kindergarten already vulnerable on one or more of these developmental domains. Part of the problem is that our public policy has not kept up with the changing nature of families. So this dark blue section in 1976 was the number of traditional families where mom stayed at home with the kids and dad went out to work. By 2014, it has shrunk to 17%. This light blue section was the number of dual income earner families, so 2 parents out at work. It bulged to 55%. And this little teeny sliver here was the number of single parents headed to families headed by women, more than doubled in those intervening years. So I'll bet you if we go around the table, almost every one of us can speak to the changing nature of families, like in our own lived experience, our own families. And yet our public policy, as reflected in childcare, hasn't kept up with that change. Hence, the solution, 10-a-day plan, that was formed from the Coalition of Childcare Advocates and the Early Childhood Educators of BC in 2011. After a lot of consultation, 40 years of experience in the sector with our 2 organizations, and this is what's been having an impact on politics and childcare in our province. So we're calling for some fundamental changes. We're calling for a new Early Care and Learning Act, and we're very hopeful, even expectant, that this will be coming in the fall sitting of the BC legislature. We don't know what's going to be in it yet, but we're proposing to legislate the rights of First Nations to design, deliver, and govern their own services. We as mainstream should not be dictating to First Nations the way they deliver childcare to their communities. The rights of young children to access quality services that respects their unique developmental needs, and for this to happen on a voluntary basis, not like school where it's a requirement. A little bit more about Indigenous rights, and we've had the great fortune to work with BC Aboriginal Childcare Society, and they've helped us really develop the Indigenous lens on our childcare plan, and you'll see that reflected in the booklet. So we believe that no matter where early childhood educators go to school in our province, if they have Indigenous children in their programs or not, they should have more learning of the history, cultures, and practices of Indigenous people, respecting and implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That's particularly poignant to bring forward today as the inquiry on murder and missing Indigenous women and girls results are released from government today. So we're calling for a new home for childcare in the Ministry of Education. Anybody know where it sits now? Right now, childcare sits in the Child Protection Ministry in government, the Ministry for Children and Family Development. Well, we don't think childcare is a child protection issue. It's an education issue. This is early childhood education. It needs to move to the Ministry of Education, with elected boards mandated and funded to plan, develop, and govern childcare. Because right now, nobody's responsible for developing childcare. It just happens where anybody thinks they can either make money doing it or serve the community doing it. There needs to be a plan on how childcare is developed to meet the needs of communities. Here's a quick snapshot of some countries and provinces, in fact, the majority of Canadian provinces and territories that already have moved childcare into a ministry of education. So it's not a weird, kooky idea to do this. It's the way it's done across most of the developed world. And in fact, there are First Nations, as Shemita's First Nation on Vancouver Island, that's already moved childcare into a Department of Education. We need to move childcare from a market commodity, not just as something that you buy and sell, like getting your vacuum cleaner service. This is actually a public service like an elementary school. Reducing parent fees to $10 a day for a full day of childcare, $7 a day for part-time care, and no fee for families who make less than $45,000 a year. Improving the wages of early childhood educators to $25 an hour, adjusted for inflation. That amount needs to increase as years go by. Our plan needs to include all children, including those with special needs, meet community need as programs expand, and use one of the early learning frameworks in our province. We need to enhance kindergarten and grade 1 by having early childhood educators working alongside teachers as professional colleagues to make better use of public facilities and extend the day so that children aren't going to one place before school, then they're 9 to 3, and another place after school. And parents like the idea of having services provided for their children at their elementary school. And then school age care is for grade 2 and up. Of course, this is just high level. I'm giving you all the highlights of the plan, but please, it's good bedtime reading for you to get more details. So we know we'll never have a high quality early childhood education system without investing in the mostly women who deliver the service. And that means respect and decent compensation. Respecting the quality, moving towards parity with elementary school teachers, more widespread access to a Bachelor of Early Childhood Education. So what does support look like for the plan? Well, we're now up to 56 local governments, including Vancouver, who have passed resolutions supporting the $10 a day plan. The majority of school districts in the province are supporting the plan. Credit unions, United Way, Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and there's a petition, of course, online for individuals to sign. So I'm hoping to encourage every one of you. You might think you've done it, but best to check. Go online and make sure you've done it. So what's happening? The feds now, with the Trudeau government, have got a multilateral agreement. BC signed it bilateral, so that we're getting $51 million a year. Not enough, because remember, when women work, we don't just pay provincial income tax. We actually pay more than federal income tax. Okay? That's right. So the feds actually should be far more involved in funding childcare than they are. The $51 million a year is better than zero, which it was. So, what's the province doing? Iglika mentioned the fee reduction initiative, reducing fees across the board for families up to $350 a month. The affordability benefit, which really is like a subsidy on steroids. It's income tested, which isn't good public policy, but it is making childcare more affordable for families. And government has followed our advice and eliminated fees for families making less than $45,000 a year in infant care. The problem, though, is that not all childcare providers have opted into this new system, and they're not, even if they have opted in, they're not all passing on the full savings to families. This is a big problem. There are quality investments in the people delivering the service, which is great. $1 an hour started last year, another $1 an hour coming next April. Bursaries, professional development dollars. The problem, though, is that it's not enough to solve the recruitment and retention problem. If you're making $14 an hour, $1 is lovely, but it's not going to help you that much. We need to get to a living wage. We need to move towards that $25 an hour average. We need to move towards parity with elementary school teachers. And there's a commitment to 24,000 new licensed spaces. 4,900 have been announced since last July. That's a great target. There's planning grants to finally start doing some planning. The problem is government is giving literally millions of dollars for the expansion of for-profit childcare. That is not the best use of public dollars. Public dollars should be used to grow public assets, and it's not a systemic approach to growing the system. So that target of 24,000 is going to be very difficult to reach using current methods. There are the $10 a day prototypes, the most massive success the government has launched. Families say that they feel like they've won the lottery when they find out they're in a $10 a day prototype. They feel guilty that not all their friends have this benefit. It's life-changing. We're hearing across the province from families. Very good news to have that universal approach. So what do we need to do in 2019? We need to secure the progress we've made to date. We need to sustain the momentum, continue to see progress, and to build support for the $10 a day plan, because that's what's pushing government. We need to actually build the system. There's much more work to do. So there's a project underway to collect some stories from families around their lived experience not having access to childcare. A single parent who at school-age childcare closed at their elementary school, so they actually had to change their child's school so that they could get after-school childcare, impacting, having repercussions for the child. One family has to get the grandmother to drive 2 hours each way to provide childcare because there's none in the community. A young mom whose fiance was providing childcare. The couple broke up, and so the mom couldn't find affordable childcare and is now on social assistance. A licensed childcare provider, mom using it, had done her due diligence, found what she thought was a licensed quality childcare with a limit of 7 children, because that's the legal limit. Has just discovered that actually the caregiver had enrolled 17 children, not 7. And so that childcare is being closed down by the Ministry of Health. So there are nightmare stories happening out there every day that further entrench the chaos. So when we say there's much more work to do, it's not an exaggeration. And so our advocacy continues, and hopefully that's why you're all here today, because we recognize the importance of this issue and the work that there's still to be done. We're calling for an expansion of the prototype sites because they are so popular and such a great way to deliver the childcare. We're calling for that, a universal approach, not income testing. We don't income test people before they enroll their child in grade 2, or before they use the local library or the community center. There are services that we think should be universally accessible. We're calling for a provincial wage grid for early childhood educators to get rid of the disparity in people still working for minimum wage. And importantly, we're calling for a systemic approach to creating new spaces. And an example would be the provincial government could do a bulk purchase of quality, custom-designed childcare modular buildings, quality modular buildings. They could order 500 of them, and they could be dispersed across the province on public land, school districts, local government land, universities, colleges, hospitals. That would create some new spaces relatively quickly and ensure that they're public assets for the future. So some people will say that childcare has been a problem for a long time, and some of us that I know around this table are grandparents and had childcare struggles of our own, and now we're seeing our children have childcare struggles, and we're not looking forward to the next generation continuing to see those struggles. So I want to give you this slide as a final reminder of how things can change. So not that long ago, this would have been considered a safe way to care for your children while you're driving in your car. So we look at this now and we're appalled what we know now around car accidents, trajectory, where seatbelts should go across babies' abdomens, everything we know about technology around car seats. But once upon a time, not that long ago, a few decades ago, this would have been considered a fine way to care for children. What we know now is that we need to do better for children. And in doing better for children, we do better for all of us. So, you can actually pull out your smartphone, you can text the word sign to that number, and you can add your name to the petition to show your support for quality, affordable childcare in British Columbia. If you've already signed the petition, you'll get back a lovely little note saying thank you very much. If you haven't, it'll prompt you to give your name so that you can make sure that you are connected to the advocacy for quality, affordable childcare. home your booklet. In front of you, there's a postcard. If you live in British Columbia, you can sign this and leave it for us, and we'll mail it for you. Doesn't matter if you don't know who your MLA is, as long as your postal code is on there, we'll know who your MLA is. And we'll make sure it gets to your MLA so that your voice is counted, and as we build and sustain this movement. And I have brochures if you're so inclined to become a member of the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC. We've got some membership forms in here today. So thank you very much.
That was so great, you guys. All these good things.
How are we doing for time, Jean?
We're to wrap up at 11:15, so we've got 6-7 minutes.
Maybe we can have a few, I just wanted to say, that stuff about the living wage is astounding, how the living wage actually went down. And I really like the idea of actually having systemics rather than piecemeal changes and focusing on moving from market economy to public service. And parity with teachers, you said that was great. So, does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Or, yeah.
I do. I actually have a comment and a question. Excellent presentations. Thank you so much. My comment is for Sharon. I really like the idea of the modular structures on public or adjacent public facilities, because one of the issues, and we'll be experiencing going into September, is when you have one child in kindergarten and one still in daycare, and they're on opposite sides of the city, what do you do?
Yeah.
So adjacent to the school would be fantastic. My question was for Iglika, and your slide that showed the public spending on childcare was fascinating, and I wonder what the model is in those top countries. So in Iceland, Sweden, some of the others, is it a facility sort of publicly owned model, or do they provide the funding to parents to stay home longer, or do the children go to school earlier? So what are they funding in those countries?
That's a great question. I know that the parents are staying home because these countries also have the highest female labor force participation in the world. So the parents are staying home. But I don't know exactly what systems look like in those countries. I know that care is provided. I don't know if it's in schools.
Yeah, so it's a system where everybody has access, they want to have access, and it's completely affordable. And so it is the kind of system that we're working to obtain.
And school also starts at 6 and
7
formal
is
schooling is
7 is doing actually. I think in most countries it is a combination of better parental leave policies, which we also need in Canada, and either the child care is in education or municipally controlled with entitlement for all. So there are slightly different systems between Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Iceland, but they all have a level of entitlement to access, affordability, highly educated and well-paid early childhood educators, often more so than in elementary school, and a sense that that's what families and children do. They participate, and lots of support at community levels in Denmark for community-based childcare.
So we should acknowledge Rita Chudnovsky in the audience. So Rita Chudnovsky is a long-time childcare advocate, former child and youth advocate for the city of Vancouver, and one of the architects of the Lower Name
Are there any more questions or comments? Yeah.
Sharon, I just wondered, you mentioned about ratios and I've been out of this system for a long time, so what are the current ratios now?
Right, so they're not bad in British Columbia. Right now it's 1 to 4 for children who are under the age of 3. It's 1 to 8 for 3 to 5-year-olds. In school age it's 1 to 12 for kindergarten and grade 1, and 1 to 15 for grade 2 and up.
When I worked here back in the 80s, I worked in 1 to 3. It was 3 to 1. Yeah. So interesting.
Any other questions?
I'm just wondering, going back to the modular idea, where's the city that kind of has this been shared with the city, and where has there been progress?
So the city of Vancouver is definitely the leader in British Columbia to have a whole department in social planning that's knowledgeable about childcare. Successive councils have set targets to create new spaces, memorandums of understanding with the school district when new schools are built or renovated to include childcare space. But we're very clear that no one municipality can ever solve the childcare crisis alone. And so we're calling on the province to do this bulk purchase of modular buildings. Certainly there's a role for the city to play to facilitate the growth of childcare, and we are seeing that happen in Vancouver. Vancouver is, every city has its own challenges. Vancouver has got lack of space, but there's always room to put a second floor on elementary schools. There's room to put modulars in parks. There's room to renovate unused school space on Vancouver's east side, for example. So we're calling on both school districts and local governments to step up and work with the province.
And have you received any feedback on that?
From the province, well, we haven't heard they've done a bulk modular purchase yet.
But is it something that's being considered? That's what I'm curious.
We hope they are considering it, yes.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly, Sharon, you were saying that about the federal bilateral funding, it's better than nothing, but we need more. Is there a number in mind? Like what would be adequate for restoration promise?
So in the costing that was done for the $10 a day plan, and there have been several costings, there has been the review of, this is an Iglika question probably, there has been a review of how much needs to come from the province and how much from the feds. And that was done both in Iglika's work and a later economic analysis done by Robert Fair from Ontario. So yes, it's part of the costing analysis. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
But here's the thing, that the target from the OECD and the international literature is 1% of GDP. So I was just trying to quickly look up what's Canada's GDP, and I don't want to give you the first number from Google, because I don't know off the top of my head what it is, but you can look it up and see what 1% of that is, and you can see what the government's doing. I mean, 51 million might sound like a lot, but just like the idea of what the BC government is spending $1 billion over 3 years, okay? And then the feds are adding 51 million here, okay? So this tiny fraction is a good way to describe it. And it does need to be one thing I didn't talk about that Sharon alluded to. And it's because I don't think this is the main reason to fund childcare at all. But actually, it pays for itself through, as the women work, and they pay taxes, federal and provincial, as they buy more things, there's GST and PST, as they are not taking like family benefits because they're not poor, they're not on social assistance, there's savings in the government programs. They don't need to, rental assistance. They don't need like a lot of the other benefits. They don't get as much. So we've actually estimated the savings, and more than 50% of the savings go to the federal government. And, but around 50. Let's say 50-50. So the program should be funded 50-50 federal provincial, ideally, to acknowledge that both the federal and provincial economies benefit. Right now, the federal provincial funding is like tiny federal, modest provincial. It needs to be larger on both dimensions.
Okay. So is there one more? Maybe
Sorry.
I can be the
I
last.
just wanted to acknowledge, so we are, we're looking at this from a provincial perspective, and also hoping other provinces will look at this. But I think we should acknowledge the city of Vancouver seems to have some specific challenges in relation to this. So, I think, $10 a day is great, and those families who have won the lottery, I feel a little bit, when they started subsidizing childcare, we didn't have childcare. So those families who've already won the lottery, get a good spot, are now benefiting more. We've been on the wait list in our neighborhood for 2.5 years. My child got in, but then they didn't receive the next, she didn't receive the next space in the next age group. So there seems to be so many problems. People commuting from Vancouver to Richmond, so not only $10 a day and quality, but accessible. And accessible has to mean, you know, within your reasonable community. Because, you know, traveling, and another friend from Trout Lake to Dunbar, and then, you know, these people all work down.
So that is part of the plan.
Yeah.
$10 a day plan is not just about affordability, it's about enough spaces to meet the diverse needs of families. So whether you work evenings, early shift, precarious work, you don't need a full-time space. One week it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, the next week it's a Thursday, Friday. So there needs to be that kind of system. So we're always pushing for 3 prongs: affordability, decent wages for early childhood educators, and more quality spaces. So doing any one of those things is not enough. It has to be all 3. So if, as your homework to take away from this event, to email the Premier and say, I expect you to move more quickly in implementing the $10 a day plan.
And so is that going to solve the problem? Because now those families have $10 a day and we still don't have childcare.
But the $10 a day plan is about getting those spaces,
Right.
like the modular purchase, to actually create those spaces more quickly.
Yeah, it may not happen for your kids, you
No, I know,
will
it won't
benefit,
happen.
which is fine, but
Well,
I
and
mean,
to
I'm
like-
for the next one
And
to
to
come,
link
right?
this back
That's-
into the education system, so, you know, kids in our community don't have access to a school. We are traveling all over the city to go to school. So it's, you know, I don't think that's an acceptable, and if that's an acceptable answer, travel half an hour each way to take your kid to school, and if that's the child, I just think that, you know,
But it's
focusing
not.
on being in the right place is also just, is really important, because giving me a spot at UBC is not going to help my family.
Absolutely, and that's what Sharon was talking about in the systems planning, because right now the government's like said, here's some money to build space, wherever you want to build it, we give you money, please go just build something. That's not how you build a system. You need to plan, like where the family's living, where do they need childcare, and my colleagues in the Ottawa office of the Canadian Center for Policy Alternatives have actually done some mapping of where the spaces are in relation to the children, and so I forget what the
Childcare deserts.
Childcare deserts is the report called. So if you Google childcare deserts Canada, you will get a map, and you can see to the community neighborhood level so what they did was how many children under 5 are there and how many licensed spaces are there. And so they did this ratio, and it's like color codes, and you can see there's huge parts, even in the city of Vancouver, that there's a lot of children who live there, and there's no childcare. There's very few spaces, and you can kind of see all over Canada where that is, and that's the kind of work we're doing to say, hey, government, when you are doing these things, they need to be planned. You need to look where the parents are living, where the families are living, and where the services exist. And yeah, absolutely, it can't just be that many across the province, wherever they happen. Whoever comes first with their proposal, first come, first serve. But that's kind of what it is right now, and it's not happening.
So I just wanted to add to that, the city has just passed this climate emergency resolution. One of the 6 goal moves is walkable communities. So we got to make sure that we put childcare into each of those walkable.
But nothing's going to happen if we're not vocal with our politicians, and if we don't make childcare an election issue at each and every election.
So I think we have to wrap up, but just, does everyone have one of those little cards to sign and give to Sharon? I don't have one.
I have one for you, Jean.
Okay, I thought you would.
I would just, on behalf of the city, really like to thank all of you for being here. This is such an incredibly potent, imperative discussion to be engaging with. And I hope you all have been inspired, as I have, to bring this back to your homes, to your communities, to your workplaces, to continue this conversation and continue the advocacy that we absolutely need. I also want to just really, really thank our panelists and Councillor Swanson for championing this work.
And how better than to have a pregnant person be the
Also with an older son, also on wait list. So this is part of my personal and professional life, very much so, as I know it is for so many of you. So yeah, really want to thank you all